lamb, they were to eat unleavened bread and bitter herbs. The elements of the meal being highly symbolic, later on they would be a point for teaching. Now you can imagine some conversations happening in those houses, right? Dad, do we really have to kill Pepper? He's really cute. Yes, Adam, we have to kill Pepper. It's you or the lamb. Egyptian boy asks his dad, "Hey, Dad, aren't you going to kill a lamb like Moses told us to?" "No, son, we don't believe in their God. We're good. We'll be fine." This was a sign for them. Verses 11 through 20, we're going to pick it up again. "In this manner you shall eat it with your belt fastened, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It's the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague will befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord. Throughout your generations, as a statute forever, you shall keep it as a feast. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove leaven out of your houses. For if anyone eats what is leavened, from the first day until the seventh day, that person shall be cut off from the people of Israel. On the first day you shall hold a holy assembly, and on the seventh day a holy assembly. No work shall be done on those days, but what everyone needs to eat, that alone may be prepared for you. And you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. For on this very day I brought your hosts out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as a statute forever. In the first month, from the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. For 7 days no leaven is to be found in your houses. If anyone eats what is leavened, that person will be cut off from the congregation of Israel. Whether he's a sojourner or a native of the land, you shall eat nothing leavened. In all your dwelling places you shall eat unleavened bread." These instructions were given to them as a sign. The family had to place themselves by faith under the cover of blood, a symbol of their faith and allegiance. It was a demonstration in their trust in the God who redeems. Victor Hamilton, Old Testament scholar in Exodus, said it this way: "For whose benefit was the sign? Can it be for God's assistance to help him know the identity of the occupants of the house, whether Egyptian or Hebrew? But are not the Hebrews already ghettoed in Goshen? Or is the sign for the benefit of the Hebrews? Only those who indicate they are placing themselves under the divine mercy and protection offered by blood will be spared. Hebrewness will not save them. Only the blood will." They had to, by faith, act on that and place themselves under the blood. Hebrewness would not save them, but faith would. They had to place themselves by faith under the protection of God. In the same way, your Americanness or your faith heritage of family will not save you. We have to come to that place of personal decision and personal, real, legit faith. Your country of association and your family will not be enough. Salvation is not automatic. We have to place ourselves under the provision of God, which is Jesus Christ. That's our only means of salvation. It's not automatic, and it was and is available to whoever would have it. It's available to any one of you, and it was available to any one of them, which is so interesting. When you're reading the Exodus story, we read that a mixed multitude went out from them. Jew and Egyptian. The Egyptians who placed themselves under the God of Israel by faith went out with the Israelites. There were some who identified with God, which is God's plan all along, was to rescue people from all nations, tribes, and languages. And so when they ate that meal, they ate it on the run, sandals on, cloak tucked, staff in hand. It was not a celebratory meal. It was a meal eaten in fear, awe and trembling. After the blood had been spread, the meal consumed, the family would sit there waiting for the Lord's Passover. Can you imagine what that would have been like? Well, the Feast of Unleavened Bread has a connection here. As we see in Exodus 12, 14, and 15, they went hand in hand, forever joined together, the Feast of Unleavened Bread with that of Passover. It began with the symbolic search and removal of leaven. And leaven in the Bible almost always symbolized sin. And so the festival then was a reminder for them of the need to remove sin from their lives and the reminder of the need for personal sanctification. But we have to know, I noticed the timeline. I think this is very interesting. First comes Passover, then comes the Feast of Unleavened Bread. First comes redemption and salvation, then you get rid of the leaven, right? Then you get rid of the sin. You don't clean house so you can come to God. You clean house because you've come to God, and that's the right way to respond to God in light of our salvation. You don't get right first, you get right and then you change. In light of redemption and salvation, it just makes sense. The entire biblical story from old to new has one very clear message, that sin is serious, but God is gracious. Sin demands death, but God is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. He's compassionate, He's quick to forgive, and He's always provided a substitute. And He's provided a substitute at the end of time in Jesus Christ. And so always there's been a substitute. Always God has made a way out for us. And that is found in His Son, the perfect Lamb. And so the first Passover event was forever memorialized in a meal. By design, it pointed to another lamb, which would be God's Son, who would bring a better covenant. And that's where we go next, where we see a new meal and a better Passover, where Jesus places Himself at the center of the meal. So if you have your Bibles, we're going to pick it up in Mark chapter 14, verse 12 through 16. So what I wanted to do there is I wanted to give you the backdrop and understand this is the rich history that informs the meal that's happening today. And in fact, I was like, man, I'm reading through this. It's like, this is really outstanding. This is exceptional. Why would we wait till next week to do communion? We're going to do it today. Because it just makes sense in light of what we're going to read to share communion today instead of wait till next week, the first Sunday of the month. So here we are. We're going to break some rules today. Just joking. So here they are preparing for Passover. If you have your Bibles, we're going to pick it up in verses 12 through 16. And on the first day of unleavened bread, when they sacrificed the Passover lamb, His disciples said to Him, "Where will you have us go and prepare for you to eat the Passover?" And He sent two of His disciples and said to them, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him, and wherever he enters, say to the messenger of the house, 'The teacher says, where is my guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' And he will show you a large upper room, furnished and ready. There prepare for us." And the disciples set out and went to the city and found it just as He had told them, and they prepared the Passover. And so we pick up the story. Jesus and His disciples are preparing to have a Passover meal together. It's the season for Passover. Arrangements had been made. The place would be set. He would leave Bethany, which is where he'd been staying for the week, and he would head into Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover in the city, because it had to be celebrated within the walls of Jerusalem. Verse 12, on the first day of unleavened bread, which now encompassed Passover, they asked Jesus, "Where are you going to have us prepare the meal?" "It's coming, Jesus. Where are we going to go?" Well, He sent two disciples with special instructions. We know from Luke chapter 22, verse 8, that it's Peter and John. And He sends them into the city where there's arrangements already made. They're to connect with a guy carrying a jar of water and follow him to a home. Now, that sounds like a needle in a haystack kind of find, doesn't it? Like, go find a guy carrying a jug of water? Like, seriously, in a city bustling with people? Well, it was abnormal for a man to carry a jug of water. That was technically, no offense, women's work, right? Women were the ones who typically carried the jars of water. And so this would have been unusual, and it would have actually stood out. And so they were to find him, look for him, and then follow him to his house. And when they found him, they were to ask the master of the house for the guest room. Where's my guest room that I might eat it with my disciples? That's what the teacher says, right? Well, it seems it's very clear that previous arrangements had been made, right? A connection had already been made. And by this time, Jesus was a wanted man. So they're moving about kind of secretively, right? Because if anybody found Jesus, they were to report him and bring him in for questioning. John chapter 11, verse 57. They would find a large upper room, and it'd be furnished and ready. They'd have low tables and couches for reclining, because when they came to a banquet, they did not sit at a dinner table, they reclined on couches. Now, for arrangements like that to be given to some random dudes, that sounds kind of weird to us, but for them, that was normal in a culture of hospitality, especially for a respected rabbi like Jesus, which reminds us, not everybody hated Jesus. There were a lot who respected him, loved him, and followed him. They went and prepared the place as prescribed. So to do that, they'd get wine, unleavened bread, bitter herbs, and harasset, which is a fruit sauce for dipping, and of course, the lamb. It had to be sacrificed at temple, and it had to be eaten with a group of no less than 10. There was actually prescriptions for this and the details. Even in the Mishnah, we see some of this, right? The point here is that by design, worship and life with God is not primarily about me, my Jesus, and I. An aspect of our worship is very much designed to be lived in the context of community. We're not meant to do life with God alone, and we're not meant to do religion and church alone. We're not meant for isolation.